Hello friends, hello professionals, and welcome to my channel, The Sea of Regulation. Simone here, and I am going to touch on a bit more of the FATF travel rule. I'm going to be looking at specific guidance and clarifications for virtual asset service providers. Now, before I dive into today's content, let me get my usual disclaimers out of the way. I am a financial services regulator. I am not a lawyer, and I'm not a financial advisor. And the views on this channel are definitely all my own and do not reflect the views of any regulatory authority or international standard setting body. Now, with that out of the way, let's dive in. Now, FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, recently updated a document and published it, a report, about 111 pages worth of a report. On October of 2021, don't know when you're going to be looking at this, but they updated that document and set out specific guidance as it relates to the travel rule. So a few months back, I did a video on the FATF travel rule and explained what it was. Essentially, AML CFT requirements for virtual asset service providers. And I'll definitely link that video in the description below. But this updated document is a follow-on from a recent publication that they've had. And so FATF has been busy at work trying to look at some of the AML, and that's the anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing risks as it relates to cryptocurrencies and the exchange of digital assets across borders. And you might be wondering, well, why should this concern the FATF? You see, given the speed of crypto, I have a preferred digital asset myself that can execute transactions in under 3 seconds with minimal fees. And there's a video about which crypto I hold or hodl. Because of the speed, you can actually increase the scope, the scale, and the risk and the impact of things going horribly wrong with cryptocurrency versus traditional payment systems, or at least that's what the discussion is being touted as. And without giving an opinion in relation to that, let's look at some of the specific guidance that they've provided. The first one that I honed in on is the need for due diligence between VASPs. So again, virtual asset service providers. What FATF travel rule says is that you need to carry out your due diligence in relation to your counterparty VASP before executing any transactions. So what does this mean? So let's take some of the crypto exchanges as VASP because they do meet the qualification. Whether it's a Binance or a Coinbase or a Kraken, if they're exchanging or transacting between themselves, they need to carry out due diligence in relation to each crypto exchange. So I've called some pretty big names, but there are very small cryptocurrency exchanges in comparison, and they're popping up all the time. You would need to carry out your due diligence in relation to each of your counterparty VASP. And then a VASP isn't necessarily a crypto exchange. It can be other service providers or individuals, depending on their activity. So that's why it's important to understand who qualifies as a VASP and carry out the due diligence in relation to them. Make sure they're not a criminal. Make sure they're not a terrorist. The high level, make sure they are who they say they are. The high level due diligence things that need to be done in any forum. FATF also sets out that regardless of whether that VASP is regulated in another jurisdiction, you still need to carry out due diligence. And there's this thing called the sunrise issue. So basically, we would appreciate that when the sun rises on the planet, right now I'm recording, it's afternoon, but it's sunrise somewhere. The light is hitting certain areas of the planet and not quite yet others. The sunrise issue is similar. You have certain jurisdictions that are developing their regulatory framework and have requirements ahead of other jurisdictions that don't yet have their requirements. And you have different VASPs that are going to be exchanging information and money and crypto and digital assets and all sorts of things with each other and will be in various states of regulatory clarity. But that shouldn't stop you from being able to engage with someone. But what the travel rule does say is that where you have a VASP that is not regulated, you should treat it with a bit higher risk. So that means maybe enhanced due diligence needs to be conducted in relation to that. And especially when you look at your geographic risk. Where is that VASP located? Now, there's another report that came out from, I think it was CipherTrace, that looked at some of the scorings of risk in relation to different jurisdictions that are popular for cryptocurrency exchanges. And I'll definitely put that in the description below because it's useful contextual information. I think people need to get clear in terms of what all of this means in relation to crypto and virtual asset service providers, because guess what? It's not going away. Now, with the travel rule, one of the things that you need to do is make sure that you exchange originator and beneficiary information. But when you're transacting crypto or digital assets in seconds, it may slow down the process. And so I personally have questions in relation to how that will actually work. They've put out the guidance that is a requirement, but certain service providers have already raised a flag to say, this is a point of concern. Perhaps we need to revisit it. Now, FATF has clarified that you can send the information in batches. But my concern and my actual question mark is, how is this in actual applied business? Because it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it. So that's one of the spaces that I'm looking at for possible future clarification. One of the other points that the FATF travel rule has looked at is the use of blockchain analytics. And there are a few firms that I'm familiar with that carry that out. I've mentioned CipherTrace before. There's also the Blockchain Intelligence Group. But there are other firms that are coming up. Those are just two firms that I'm personally knowledgeable about. Those two firms carry out blockchain analytics, but FATF has clarified that blockchain analytics can be used to examine any discrepancies in relation to VASPs. So do you have any mixing going on, any certain discrepancies in terms of how people are transacting on the ledger, and you're seeing maybe a mixing service that is happening, and some of the other dangers that happen with crypto. Because blockchain is immutable, you can always find the record. And blockchain analytics is really a good help, I think at least, in terms of detecting and addressing your mind to certain patterns and seeing whether the VASP that you're dealing with should be treated with a little more reserve because you're seeing some behavior that is not acceptable for your compliance tolerance and your risk tolerance. Now, guys, there are a few more things that I can say in relation to the FATF travel rule, like DeFi and what they're going to do in relation to that. DeFi doesn't lend itself in the same way that traditional financial services would. And so it's a bit difficult to contemplate how you would address your mind to AML CFT requirements. I believe it can be coded in. I think anything can be coded in, but that's just me. But if you want me to go over some of the things that I see in relation to DeFi as it relates to compliance and risk assessment, definitely drop it in the comments below. But I'm going to end this video here, guys. You know what to do if you've watched my video before. Definitely give me a thumbs up. It helps the YouTube algorithm. Share with your friends, especially if they're interested in learning more about the crypto space, virtual asset service providers, DEXs, DeFis, NFTs. There are a lot of abbreviations, kind of like the FATF. And subscribe if you haven't. Make sure you hit the notification bell because I come up with a video at least 2 videos a week. And I'm going to try and keep the content coming maybe even more frequently because with the pace of change, especially in the crypto space, it is always good to be on the cutting edge. And I'll do my best to do that. But until my next video, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here and see you on the next one.